if you, in telling the truth, get punished, then the person doing that to you is in error and they're not understanding some truths about God's truth. Right?
You can follow on that there's painful consequences as a result of violating truth, though.
But they are automatic upon the soul. It's not about punishment. It's just about the consequences upon the soul that resonate with the universe. In fact, whenever you violate any law, there's just an automatic consequence on the soul, right? It's not because of someone trying to punish you, trying to make you feel bad about yourself. It's just an automatic consequence. So why would you, as a parent, or why would you, as a friend, or why would you, in any organisation, try to punish a person more than what than the penalties that they've already received by violating law? Do you understand what I mean by that? Every time you have a desire to punish somebody for what they've done, you are actually yourself breaking God's law. You're actually usurping God, in fact. Can you see that? You're putting yourself above God because God doesn't even do punishment. And if you do it, then what you are doing is you're saying, I've got the right to punish or project punishment emotions at this adult. God doesn't do these things. So the key is every time I desire to do it, I'm out of harmony with God's truth. There's an emotion in me causing me to do that. Now in this case, obviously it's very difficult for a child to actually say to itself, Mum was out of line and these nuns were out of line, when all of these terrible emotions were projected at you, causing a lot of physical pain even, and emotional pain inside of you that are now lived through your life. So one of the things that you are going to need to do to open it all up emotionally is start telling yourself the complete truth. One thing to remember is the truth is always emotional. Now, if you do not tell yourself the complete truth, if you minimise it, justify it, shift the blame to someone else, repress it, deny it, and do all of those other things we talked about yesterday, if you do any of those things, what you're actually doing is locking up your own experience of truth. So one of the things when you say, oh, but it was only, as soon as you say those words, oh, but it was only, and then mention what it is, it was only a 22. As soon as you say that, you are actually minimising the truth. When you minimise the truth, what is actually happening now is you're locking up the emotion. That's the automatic result of your minimisation of truth. Does everyone understand that? As soon as you minimise the truth, justify it, and shift the blame onto others, as soon as you do all of those other repressing things to the truth, what you're actually doing is actually repressing your emotions as well. That's what you're doing. Your emotions will only flow if you stay in truth.
Because I was actually to a stage where I didn't care if she shot me that day.
Exactly. Yeah.
And she went click and there was like no bullet. And it was right at me back, so. But I was that mad.
That you couldn't care less anymore.
Yeah, I punched the wall and walked away from her after I got down off the roof, and then I was that mad and angry that I couldn't care.
Now, understand that this event didn't happen when Gary was little.
I was like 21 or something.
Okay. So he was actually now an adult being chased around by his mother with a gun. Right? And could have been murdered, actually.
Yeah, and I didn't even care about
Now, let's say the truth about Gary's mum. Now, this is not a judgment of Gary's mum. This is just the truth about Gary's mum. What emotions must be in this lady to drive her to actually chase her son around with a gun? So, huge rage towards men in particular, right? Which would be suppressing what kind of emotion? Huge amount of grief towards men. Right, that must be also there, you find? And what is she choosing to do? Not experience those emotions, but rather take them out on her son. And it creates, of course, a lot of things within you. Now, is what she did, from God's perspective, right? No. We need to say that. Is what she did toxic?
Yes.
Okay, so we need to say that. Just say the truth. Gary's mum was a toxic mother towards you. And to be honest, if Gary's mum was sitting in the audience, I'd be saying exactly the same thing to her. And if she couldn't accept that, then she just cannot accept the truth. And it's not a judgment of her, because she has all of these other emotions inside of her that created all these things, right? And Gary doesn't need to go down that track of even knowing what they are or having any commiseration for those emotions, because if he does that, what is he doing? He's justifying her actions, which then also detunes me from my emotions, which detunes me from the truth. You follow me? So the only thing we can do is just state the complete truth about what she is doing and has done right now. Now, many of you do not want to face the truth about what your parents have actually done to you or treated you as. Many of you also don't want to face what you have done as parents towards your own children. And in the end, if you want to feel all of your own emotions, you will need to face both of those things. Right? Because that's the truth. The truth can be accepted. Yeah? So Gary's question earlier was, where was God's truth in that? The answer is, God's truth wasn't anywhere in that. That was all your mum acting on her personal truth, you know, your nuns acting on their personal truth, you being forced into conforming. And how did it feel for you in your heart? How did it feel for you at that moment? When you were blamed for stealing.
Well,
how did you feel then?
Ashamed.
Ashamed. And how did you feel when you then you had to go and sort of confess to lying, and you never did that? Confess to stealing, and you never did that. So you had to basically lie to get out of it. How did you feel then?
Yeah, for getting, I don't really know.
And how did you feel about getting hurt, punished because of it? Twice?
Yeah.
3 times?
Got used to that.
You got used to it. So that is another justification. How did you feel? How does it feel?
I always think I always think that she was doing the right thing by us, by teaching us the right thing to do.
Can you see why Gary's not experiencing emotion?
Yeah, shutting it down, justifying it.
You're justifying her behaviour. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Yep.
You think she meant well?
Well,
Do you
yeah,
think
she said
by
she
that
meant,
action?
she said she meant well.
Just because someone says something, it doesn't mean it's true, right? Mary, you?
I was just going to say that Gary was given some emotions, some feelings about himself from his mother and from the nuns. God has some different emotions about him, and that's God's truth in that situation.
Exactly. Yeah. So what Gary was feeling was all of these other people's personal truths, but God's truth wasn't anywhere to be found really, from what happened to Gary, except that God wants Gary to understand the truth, and even then wanted him to understand the truth, and now wants you to understand the truth, that God doesn't feel the way your mother feels.
Yeah, I can understand that very well.
No, you don't.
Well, some of the weird things she done was...
Well, let's look what's being projected onto God. What do you feel God is going to do? When you experience all of your emotions, what do you feel God's going to do?
Oh, not punish me for that, for a start.
No, that's what you think. It's not what you feel.
Well, yeah.
What do you feel?
Well,
What did your mother do?
punish me, yeah.
So what do you think God's going to do?
Yeah, punish me, yeah. I'll go to hell.
Right, so the truth of the emotion inside of Gary is that he now believes that God is the same as his mother. Right? And you do believe that. Even though you think, you've heard, we talked about all these truths about God, and you know God's not like that here.
Yeah.
But you feel God is that here.
Yeah, I think I'm one of the ones that, won't get there.
Yeah. You have a deep feeling.
Because I've lied so much and everything over the years.
Yeah. Right. So Gary, because he's lied most of his life because of these childhood events.
I even made up stories to make me a hero.
Yeah.
Like, as a kid, I've made up stories or whatever. But then as I've told them over and over and into adulthood, I've forgotten what the real truth is.
Yeah.
I've blown up the stories or whatever.
So much that they're unrecognisable now, even to yourself.
And I don't even know what the truth is.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's how bad it got.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was all coming from the fear, wasn't it? All coming from this fear that...
Well,
terror.
yeah, terror. Because we used to be, as kids, we'd be told to clean the house up or whatever. But then my mother would go off to vote But then she'd come back and appear at a bedroom door and say, your mother told you kids to clean the house up.
So she'd make out she's an apparition.
Yeah. And it used to scare the hell out of us. And then when she'd come home, we'd tell her that, and she'd say, "You're mad, you're silly," you know. And then I'd be in the thunderbox down the backyard, playing with a candle on the wall, you know, playing with the matches.
Yeah.
And she'd appear out of the dark and say, "Your mother told you not to play with matches." And then she'd disappear, and then I'd run up and tell her, and she'd say, "Oh, you're silly, you know, you're mad. Don't be so silly. Get to bed."
So what was her desire? To terrify him.
Yeah.
And I don't know why that would be, only that she would be trying to make us do the right thing.
No, but see, there's where we make the step from what did she actually do, what's the truth of what she actually did, into trying to justify what she did, as there must be some loving reason. And as soon as we go into that state of trying to justify what she did, then we actually are stepping away from the emotion of how we actually felt about what she did, and we can't experience the emotion. There's a really, really good book for many of you that you may wish to read. It's called Toxic Parents. I think it's Dr. Susan Forward is the author. It's written in the 1960s. It was a very old book she was so blunt, right? One thing I love about that book, and this is something probably that you need to consider reading as well.
I've even read that David Helton book.
Yeah.
And apart from the Xerox and everything, taking the gap up there, I can't see much wrong with what you do. And it doesn't faze me.
There's another book that Gary just mentioned that is about, if you've experienced childhood abuse of any kind, you will probably want to read this book. It's a trilogy. It's called My Story, by Dave Peltzer. Pelzer. And it's a story about his childhood abuse, and then as he was growing into a teenager, and then now how it's affected him as an adult. And it's a really, really good book to help you connect with childhood emotions. But Gary just mentioned that he didn't see much difference between Dave's life and his own.
Apart from the bad things that happened to him. But
some of the bad things, yes.
Some of the bad things that happened.
Yeah. So the issue here is, what does God want us to do? God wants us to face all of the truth about what's happened to us. You follow me?
Say that again.
God wants us to face all the truth about what's happened to us. Now, that means facing the truth of how people treated us really as it was. Not how we want it to be now, but how it really was. Right? How many of you were never hugged by your father? Never hugged. Can't even remember a time, except for maybe recently, maybe when he's grown up. Right? But never hugged as a child by your father. That's like more than half of the audience, right? How did that affect you? What's the truth about that?
We felt not good enough and unloved.
Yeah. All right. Now, God wants you to face that truth. To just face it and experience that emotionally. That's what God wants. So divine truth wants you to state the truth about everything.